Welcome to the Big Four Accounting Firms podcast, brought to you by big4accountingfirms.com and the Big Four Accounting Firms YouTube channel. Before we get started, just wanted to remind everybody to support us if you have a chance or if you can. Even $1 helps, and we have a link in the description to a website called Buy Me a Coffee. It's just a way to donate to us and support us. Again, any amount is helpful so that we can keep putting out content. And there's also other ways for you to support us in the show notes to this podcast or on YouTube in the description. In today's podcast, we're going to be discussing some issues with KPMGs, and related to that, we had a listener question which basically lines up to this news perfectly. And we're getting a lot more questions now that the podcast is getting more popular, and also that I'm answering a lot more questions. But someone on YouTube sent us a question about KPMG and why I'm always ranking them last and how they're doing in the Central Europe and Europe region. Now, I don't know specifically about the Central Europe region. We don't hear much news out of there, so I'm guessing they're a smaller firm in that region. I mean, they're going to be the smaller firm everywhere. The main thing with KPMG is they're the fourth largest Big Four accounting firm, and they're not there by mistake. As you saw last year during COVID, the accounting firms struggled a little bit, but all of them grew except for KPMG. They did not grow, and I believe that's for several reasons. But before we go into all these reasons why I'm always down on KPMG, we'll give an example, and this example will be from the most recent news. The most recent news out of KPMG is that their former UK interim CEO, Mary O'Connor, is seeking an exit from the firm, and she's negotiating that exit. And the reason she's negotiating that exit is because she did not get the long-term CEO position. Instead, it's somebody else. They chose another older white guy, as they normally do, as accounting firms normally do. And there's nothing wrong with that. It should, if that wasn't their goal. The thing is, it's not their goal to have a bunch of old white guys in their leadership. They say that they want to have diversity across races and gender, and they're just not executing on that, especially when they had an opportunity here. They had an opportunity to have a woman in leadership, and they did not take advantage of that. They got her from another corporation. She was not at KPMG her whole career, because if I saw that she was at KPMG her whole career, that would worry me even more. But that's not the case. She came from somewhere else. She had this potential to ascend into the CEO position, and they did not give it to her. And she wants to leave. And the fact that she's an executive and leadership, and she's only been there a couple of years, and she's trying to negotiate her exit, it speaks volumes about KPMG. And also just the sudden exit of Bill Michael in general speaks volumes about KPMG. There's a lot of reasons why I don't like KPMG. And it's from personal experience, from experience of colleagues and professionals and people I know that some of them are still there. Some of them left because they didn't like it there. KPMG does not have good leadership. It starts at the tone of the top, and I'll cover a bunch of stories. Several years ago, you have to remember that KPMG in the United States had a huge issue with their audit leadership. And the audit leadership was being tipped off by the PCAOB, which is a regulator in the United States, about reviews of their audits. And so what KPMG did was they're trying to improve those audits behind the scenes before the PCAOB arrived. They got caught, and they had to get rid of their audit leadership. And so you don't have something like that happen unless you have a really, really bad tone at the top. And I think they do. And similarly, many, many years ago, KPMG had a tax shelter issue where they were accused of selling tax shelters. And they probably would have gone the way that Arthur Andersen would have, except they reached a deferred prosecution arrangement with the United States government. Otherwise, they might have gone out of business. So that's another issue there. And what else? In KPMG, Lynn and she was replaced by a man. I don't know. That to me, it's just they're not. KPMG wants to be this equitable social justice company, and they're not executing on their plans. I also don't know if she left on the best of terms. Another thing is KPMG Australia was being sued for age discrimination. So this isn't only occurring in the UK, where we saw Mary O'Connor trying to leave, or the US. It's also happening in Australia. There's issues there. KPMG Canada and other KPMG firms were some of the first accounting firms to let people go during COVID-19. So this shows when times get a little bit tough that they are quick to go against their employees. Now they're giving them raises around the world, but they were the quickest to start laying people off, and it reflected in their results. The results, they lost revenue. Now we saw them bounce back quickly in places like Australia. In Australia, they did pretty well, but now they're lacking behind the other big four because they did these layoffs so quickly. Their partner pay is the lowest of the big four accounting firms. That obviously makes sense if they make the least amount of money. So that's another reason. You also have to remember they settled a discrimination lawsuit in the U.S. recently for discriminating against women and their pay. In most cases, in most regions, they have the least prestigious clients. You can obviously access very prestigious clients through KPMG because they are a big four accounting firm, but they're just going to have the least prestigious in most common scenarios out of the big four accounting firms. And in my experience and other people's experience, they're the least proactive at getting clients. When I worked there, they just were not interested in pursuing the biggest clients and staying in touch with them and winning work and being in networking with the largest clients. They could honestly care less. They were more interested in just responding to RFPs. They would wait for RFPs to come in, and RFPs are just requests for proposals. And along the same lines, they're the least proactive at keeping their staff busy. If you're a low-level staff person, they're not as worried about keeping you as busy, in my experience, as the other accounting firms. The other accounting firms are very proactive at keeping their staff busy. KPMG was not, and based on other people I've spoken to, that's similar as well. And a lot of this is like I said before, tone at the top. And personally, and through friends and colleagues, KPMG is the least professional environment I've ever worked in. I've seen some of the most toxic behavior at KPMG. People throwing things at other people yelling, people with unethical behavior, as far as unethical behavior in reviewing their work, and the lack of review in expense policy. And, I have a decent amount of experience and have worked several places, and I've seen unethical things at all places. But that's what I'm saying. I saw the most unethical behavior, maybe not the most unethical, but the most consistently unethical behavior at KPMG, where it was okay. It was commonplace. It was winking and nodding at each other as people were doing inappropriate things in a professional setting. It is just not appropriate, and was most common at KPMG. People might do inappropriate things outside of work at happy hours or other things, but I saw the most inappropriate things in a work environment while at KPMG. So, and I've had many friends that have left KPMG for similar reasons. So those are the number of reasons why I would rank KPMG the lowest. And I know there's people going to be out there that say, my experience is this, but I know a lot of people, and I've spoken to many of them. I've experienced a lot of things, and there's a reason you get all these news stories about KPMG is because the tone at the top. And the other big four have their issues too, right? They run into scandals, they have lawsuits, but it's not the same as KPMG. KPMG is just on a different level. And at the end of the day, the money talks. And they are the fourth largest accounting firm out of the big four for a reason. It's the way that they're run from a global perspective. It's not just one area either. Obviously, it's going to be different in certain areas because they're a partnership. So they're based on partners. So you can have pockets of really good people within inside of KPMG. So it's up to you to make the decision of whether you want to work at KPMG, whether you want to join that firm. You can't say it just based on my thing. You have to do it based on your experience. But before you make your decision, just understand that based on my experience, other experience, and news stories about KPMG and their financial results of what you're getting into. So that's the podcast for today. To stay up to date, make sure to subscribe to this podcast. Support us financially through the Buy Me a Coffee link in the show notes to this podcast or on the description in YouTube. And make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel, Big Four Accounting Firms. Thanks for listening.